Hi, my name is Sheridan Webb and I own Keystone Development and Training Limited, which is a training consultancy that specialises in bespoke training design for larger organisations. For the last 20 years, I've been designing training and I've worked with companies such as Kellogg's, Costain, Johnson Cleaners, Aldermore Bank, Warburton's and very many others. In that 20 years, I've seen it all. I've seen the good, the bad, the boring, the indifferent and the downright awful. And in this short presentation, I want to share my experience with you so that you can avoid making some of the more common mistakes that I've seen when people are designing training. The first mistake is failing to do a proper training needs analysis. Now, I know that sounds obvious, and I'm sure that the vast majority of people listening to this will always do a really good training needs analysis. However, sometimes it doesn't happen for a wide variety of reasons. We're often under pressure to get something out there quickly, so we shortcut it and we skip it. We might be told by senior managers what needs to be covered, and who are we to argue with the people on high? Maybe we've been seduced by the latest thing and the latest shiny theory and practice, and we genuinely believe it will work. However, without conducting a proper training needs analysis that investigates what the actual problem is, why it's happening, any training that you design is only ever going to be designed on guesswork. So whilst it might be a great experience, it won't actually deliver results and make a difference to the business. Mistake number 2 is ignoring business priorities and objectives. Training should never ever stand alone. There's an old saying that what gets measured gets done. So if the training isn't in line with business priorities and operational, normal way of doing things, it's likely to fail. And that's one of the problems, I think, with sending people on external courses. Even if those courses are good, they're not run with your business objectives in mind. So some of the things that people learn might even contradict what you're trying to achieve in the business. So for great training, we really need to link it back as frequently and as clearly as possible to everyday operations and to what the business is trying to achieve. Something I see way too often is mistake number 3. Even those really experienced training people who've done a good TNA and they really understand what they're trying to do, they think, right, the next thing I need to do is open PowerPoint. And that just makes me want to weep. The next step is never to open PowerPoint. I mean, PowerPoint should not be opened until the last possible moment, if it is opened at all. I'm not a fan, however, I do understand that a lot of people do like to use it. The reason I'm not a fan is that PowerPoint forces you to think in a linear way. It just takes you from point to point to point to point, and it actually stifles all your creativity. So it encourages presentation rather than interaction. So if you're designing a half-hour briefing session, knock your socks off, go for it, open PowerPoint and use it, because that is what it's designed for. It does not encourage interactive experiential training. It also means if we're opening PowerPoint, particularly if we've used that as our visual aid before, that it's too easy to reuse an existing course. So all those fresh ideas that we had from the training needs analysis when we set those objectives, we're going to be susceptible to scope creep as we look at our previous courses and think, oh, that was a good exercise, or that was a good point, we'll just throw that in. So please, please, please do not open PowerPoint until the last possible moment. Mistake number 4 is forgetting who it's for. Now, I don't think this happens a great deal, but it does happen. The training is for the delegates and possibly the commissioners of that training. It is never ever for the trainer. It's not an opportunity for you to showcase your knowledge or spend time covering what you like to cover or indulge in your pet subject. I once worked with a very capable trainer who covered assertiveness in every single one of her courses because she really enjoyed training that. It wasn't always relevant to what the delegates needed. So you need to cover what the delegates need covering, what the commissioners want covering, and you need to pitch it right. You need to use their language and include examples and case studies that reflect their world, not yours. Similarly, I've been on courses where we've had a whole room full of production managers and we're talking about going to meetings and scheduling, using Excel and Microsoft packages. Those guys don't use those things. So one of the key things with designing training is always keeping your target audience in the forefront of your mind. Another common mistake is cramming too much in. There's often a lot of pressure to cover everything in as short a time as possible, and that's totally understandable. We don't want people to be away from their job for longer than they need to be. It's costly, it's disruptive, and it makes a lot of sense. However, we cannot cram 3 days worth of material into half a day session. It will never work. It's far better to cover a few things well than cover everything badly. So when we're under pressure to keep putting things in, keep linking back to the training needs analysis that you did and the objectives that you have drawn from that. How will this content help you to deliver against those objectives? How will it solve the problems identified in the TNA? If it won't, leave it out. Sometimes that means we have to push back to managers who think that covering more means it's going to be a better training course. We know that covering the right things well is what will make a more successful training course. After all, people can go and get more for themselves via other resources. They can go to the internet, they can speak to people, they can watch videos, they can read books. There's a whole host of other ways that they can get supplementary information if that's what they need. Mistake number 6 is relating to the design of the actual training materials, and it's not getting the level of detail right. And this is something I could talk about all day long because this is essentially what I do. This is the core of my job. When you're designing training, particularly for other trainers to use, getting the level of detail right is absolutely vital. People aren't mind readers and they don't know what's in your head. So if we don't put enough detail in, the trainer can get confused, they will make it up, and it can lead to creep across locations and across time, and there's no consistency, which for a large organisation is pretty bad. However, if you put too much detail in, people will feel restricted or overwhelmed, and they won't be able to inject their own personality, which again is something that we really need trainers to be able to do. So we need to provide training material that is robust enough for trainers to pick up and know what they need to do, for you to explain it to a stakeholder and to give them confidence that the training is doing what they want it to do, but also is going to allow for that little bit of tailoring and adaptation in the training room. So this means things like providing examples in your training materials, providing guidance on how to run activities, providing some sort of suggestions as to what to look for when you have a group discussion, even if it's just a few bullet points. It's really important that you don't assume that you're the only person who will ever run the training that you're writing. You need to make sure that any other competent trainer who picks up that material can do the job to a reasonable standard. You also need to make sure that delegates have got something to refer back to that will make sense after the event. So for that, the standard materials that I provide when I'm designing training is a detailed trainer's guide, a detailed delegate workbook, which is often just delivered as a downloadable now. Handouts are used on the course, and they are usually things that are related to exercises and activities. So that will be something for delegates to fill in. It will be case studies, it will be role play briefs. And as I've already mentioned, the slides should just be pictorial in most cases. So getting that detail right and making sure that it works for both the trainer, the stakeholder and the delegates is absolutely vital. Mistake number 7 is putting everything on slides. I've already mentioned this a number of times as my personal bugbear, but what a lot of trainers do as part of their detailed design is they do detailed slides rather than using the notes pages, if that's the way they want to go, or creating a separate trainer's guide. Your slides should aid your presentation. They should never ever drive it if they are needed at all. As I said before, if you want to give people information to take away, create a workbook or point them to online resources. Giving people a copy of the slides should never be a substitute for them attending your training. If they can get everything they need off a slide, why on earth would they attend your training? There's got to be more to it than that. So limit the use of slides, please. Mistake number 8 is making it too trainer-led. This relates back to one of the earlier points, really. It's not about you, it's about them. However, there are reasons why we end up having quite trainer-heavy sessions, and a lot of that is to do with restricted time and trying to get through too much material. There's an abundance of information freely available on the internet these days, and delegates do not need you to provide a lecture. Use pre-course work, pre-course reading, point them to videos, point them to books, point them to articles. If they are going to sit in a room and listen to somebody talking to them, I would argue that they don't need a training course. The trainer, whilst being a valuable source of information, is not the only source of information in that room. Everyone in the room has experience and expertise, and it's the trainer's job to make sure that that experience and expertise is drawn out. We can learn from every single person in the room, not just the person at the front. The trainer's job is not to provide information, it's to draw out learning for the people in the room, which leads me to my next point. Mistake number 9, which is making your training boring. There's absolutely no excuse. A lot of training fails simply because it's boring. We don't remember it, we're not engaged by it, we just keep looking at our watches, wondering how much longer we've got to sit here before we can leave. Use brain-friendly techniques. That will capture people's interest and it will keep them engaged for the whole session, because people won't learn if they aren't paying attention. We learn best when we are emotionally and socially engaged. That's when our brain is firing on all cylinders. We're engaging all our senses. We are making links. We are learning through and with other people. We've got time for reflection. We're able to sift out the meaning and we're able to have a go at things. So keeping people physically active and mentally engaged is essential if they are to learn, remember and apply. And using accelerated learning techniques is absolutely crucial if you want to create a training event that has impact, not just on the day, but when people go back to work and apply what they've learned. Mistake 10 is not joining the dots for people. I think one of the traps that we've all perhaps fallen into to a greater or lesser extent as trainers is forgetting that the people who are attending an event haven't been on the journey that we've been on to get from that initial training needs analysis to where we are today. So sometimes we need to really draw out the links for them. In addition to this, too much training is often seen as something separate to work. So not only drawing the links between the objectives and what we're doing on the day, but also how what we're doing on the day links to what they do on an ordinary day. So helping them see how they can apply what they've learned. Sometimes seemingly fun exercises can have really powerful learning points, but not everybody will make the link. So the debrief of those exercises is so important, and sometimes we really do have to spell it out. So whether we're linking it to business objectives, KPIs, processes, procedures or competencies, people are more likely to take the learning seriously when they see a direct link to their success in their everyday role. So really help them to see how they can take what they've learned in the training room and put it into practice in real life. Mistake 11 is no buy-in. I've seen it so many times. The training department has spent a lot of time and effort putting together a really great course that no one's interested in. And this is often because they just sort of slip it out into the business, maybe by an email, or they pop it up on the intranet and hope that people will come and beat down their doors for this training. Well, do you know what? People are busy. People aren't looking on the intranet. And unless there's a burning need for training, it's always something that they will do later. So when you've designed your training, where are you going to get that buzz from? How are you going to market that training? How are you going to launch it? Have you gone back to the stakeholders and shown them how what your great design has done in order to meet their needs? Are the benefits for delegates known? Will managers release people to attend the training, or will they just see it as another thing that they have to try and work around? Do people really see the value? So having a great training course sadly isn't enough. We've got to really go out there and tell people about why it's great and all the great reasons why they should attend that course and the benefits it's going to have for the business. Mistake number 12 is not having a clear action plan or follow-up. Now, strictly speaking, this presentation is about designing great training, so we're straying a little bit beyond that with this point. However, in the design of your training program, you need to build in time for proper action planning and really giving people time to think about how they are going to apply what they've learned and how they're going to measure their own success. Because people typically leave training courses having had a nice time. They found it interesting, they've had a lovely day. But when they get back to work, and they immediately just go back to doing things the way they've always done them. So it's important during the design phase to think about some quick wins that they can put into place immediately and that are related to real work, so that they can do something quickly and easily that's maybe low risk, that will at least start them down that path of applying what they've learned. There also needs to be a plan in place for following up and holding people accountable. It's fantastic if your business releases people for training, but what is the point if nothing changes as a result? Now, that may not be the training department's remit to go and follow up training. That may land with the line managers. However, as the training designer, what you need to do is make sure that that question is at least asked and people are aware that there does need to be follow-up, that a one-day training course, for example, isn't going to solve all the world's problems. It's the consistency of application, it's the conversations, it's the feedback that goes on after that training course that will really make the difference. After all, what gets measured gets done. And if line managers aren't showing any interest in what's been covered on the training course, if they aren't trying to see people make a difference at work, why would anybody bother? So that's just 12 of the common mistakes I come across when people are designing training. So I hope you found it useful. What now? Well, that might be all you needed to know. So if it was, brilliant. If you want to continue learning, you can join our Learning Connections group on LinkedIn. Just search for us and you're very welcome to join the group, where the idea is that we just share ideas about how to design great training. You can join my Keystone Development mailing list. You will get a newsletter approximately once every fortnight. It tends to focus on some hints and tips, particularly around training design, but sometimes we talk about L&D more generally, and sometimes we talk about things like management skills. So if you want to sign up for that, that would be great. If it's not for you, you can always unsubscribe. You can download my Guide to Designing Effective Training, which is a more detailed ebook, so you can download that and use it for your reference. Or if there's something specific that you'd like help with, do get in touch. My email address and website are on the next page. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you found it useful, and I hope you'll get in touch. Take care. Bye.